Today I'm going to talk to you about World War II and how it began, the events that occurred during the war and how it ended, as well as the future implications that it put upon us. I have always loved this topic, and I've always wanted to do a speech on it, and I took this advantage to actually give you this speech today. So one of the biggest reasons that the war began was because of World War I. World War I forced the Germans to give replications to the French, British, and Russians for the destruction that was caused during the war. And this was a major reason that the people of Germany would rebel and start fighting against the people of Europe. And another huge reason for this war starting was the Great Depression. The Great Depression put a lot of these countries in economic debt, and it forced them to want to expand their territory and make more money in the long run. And Japan, Germany, and Italy invaded many parts of the world. This was the main reason that this war started. Many countries got involved because of this, and places like Poland, Czechoslovakia, they were the first to actually get touched by the war. On the European front, after Germany's invasion of Poland, Britain and France decided to join the fight. They joined the fight after the fact that Germany has taken Czechoslovakia and Poland. The other half of Poland was taken by Russia, and they shared an armistice agreement with each other they shared Poland to help better their own country. After Germany invaded Poland, though, they invaded places like Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, northern France, and Norway. Once they took northern France, it was the end of the war for the French. The French could no longer become involved, and they had to move into the southern regions of France, where Italy actually took advantage of this and invaded them from the southeast. But the war wasn't only in Europe. It also occurred in North Africa during the colonial reigns of European empires. These places were taken by the Germans and Italians, and most of what was claimed there was taken over by other European countries that they claimed land from. That would be said, they took land from France, they took land from the Netherlands, Belgium, etc. This would be another huge reason that would get the Allies involved, and this is the first place in which they get involved. Soon, Germany decided to focus on their primary target of Russia. They knew Russia was a hard target, and they couldn't just bat an eye at them and walk away. They needed to go towards them. So what they did, they took Romania and Hungary's help, and they took over Greece and Russia, Western Russia that is, all the way to the point where they got to Moscow. They were at the gates of Moscow before the Russians finally stopped them and forced them to retreat. After this started, the Germans rolled through much of Europe. The Allies began to come involved, and the Allies actually invaded most of North Africa at this point, and they even got up to the part where they got in southern Italy. Once Italy has been taken, Germans took over North Italy and claimed it as their own, but South Italy signed an armistice agreement with the Allied forces and told them they will help them during the fight. And this is what will create the distrust with the Italians and Germans. Eventually, the Allies launched D-Day. D-Day was the biggest fight that occurred during World War II. It was one of the most strategic points, one of the most strategic battles. If this battle was lost, the Allies could have lost all of Europe and they could have lost the war. But they were successful. They got into the beaches of Normandy, France, and they invaded from the beaches into the hedgerows, which actually pushed them back because the hedgerows were a very tyrannous land and they couldn't get over it very quickly. But once they got over it, they rolled right into France and the Netherlands and Belgium, and they got all the way to the German border. Once they were at the German border, two major battles took place. One was called the Battle of the Bulge, which took place around this area of Germany. And what happened was the Germans put their forces on the lines when there were the weakest point in the Allied territory. They attacked the weakest point that they had. And this created a bulge that actually stopped them at their tracks, and there was a war going on for at least a few months in this spot. Eventually, the Allies were able to push them back to the point where the Germans had to give up. Another war was also going on in the southern regions towards Switzerland. This war would be detrimental to the Germans because the Germans put most of their military strength at this point. And once the Allies took this point, they were no more. Germany had to give up at this point because there was no fighting back from the Allies. Russia invaded from the east, and the Germans lost. But this wasn't the end of the war. The war was also happening on the Asian front. Japan took most of Eastern Asia, Southeast Asia, and China, and they had Korea and a lot of the Pacific Islands. And this would be a huge turning point for the Pacific region of the world. At this time, the Japanese made a fatal mistake, and they attacked Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor would be the reason that the Americans become involved in the war. This is what stopped the Japanese at their tracks. Once they hit Pearl Harbor, the Americans came through and attacked them. They destroyed their naval bases, they destroyed most of the islands that they've taken, and reclaimed them in the name of the Allies. They used the Australian, New Zealand, and British help in India, and they took out all the rest of the Japanese troops. After this point in time, the Japanese never won a single battle since then. Soon enough, they made their way into Iwo Jima and Okinawa. These were islands of Japan, and this was a very huge turning point for them because once they hit these islands, the Japanese became fearful, and there were so many people who died in these battles on the Japanese side that they began to give up, but they haven't yet. The next target was the mainland of Japan, and what the U.S. did, instead of putting its allied forces on the land, they bombed many economically important cities in Japan. And once they hit Nagasaki, they already hit Hiroshima. Once they hit Nagasaki, the Japanese gave up completely. They realized this war was not going to be won, and they gave up. This was the end of World War II in all. But what did that occur after the war? What caused the war to be so important to us? Well, many towns and cities were destroyed because of the war. This would leave impacts that you can see today. If you go to France or Germany or anything, you will see battle zones from World War II, and they're still there to this day. And there is a mass murder of European Jews at the time. This forced them to want to leave Europe, and they created a new nation called Israel, which would become more important in history as we go time and time again. To this date, it's a very important part in our history. This war also led to the Cold War. There was distrust between Russia and America, and they were both the economically most powerful countries in the world, and that would be what created the Cold War. And in Asia, Korea was liberated, but they were trying to decide what government to be in place in their country. And there was a civil war that happened, and this would also become very detrimental to the Cold War. That would be Europe as it was after the war. As you can see, most of Russia has taken Eastern Europe and East Germany. West Germany was divided between the Allies, and they took control of that part of the country. In conclusion, it was one of the deadliest wars in history, and it became one of the most important wars in our recent history. It changed so much of what we know today. And I just want to thank you for your time, for being here today. Thank you again.